All right, hey everybody, welcome back to another Ninja Arm MSP live chat. It's been a while, guys, but I'm so happy to see everybody in the chat, even though we're getting demands for snacks and we didn't bring enough for everybody. But hopefully, wherever you're calling in from, you've got some snacks with you. What we do have are some amazing experts here for you guys and some really good resources on the way. And the topic that we're discussing is a pretty timely one, of course. It's incident response planning, and particularly incident response for planning around ransomware. Let's. I've got an agenda doc per usual. I can go over the normal things like yes, this call is being recorded. We are here to answer questions, so don't be shy about using the ask a question thing at the bottom or just diving into the chat. As always, we definitely want to be active in the chat. We appreciate all of you guys being here. This is a chance for you to have access to, not so much me, that's not a big prize, but access to Tom, access to the rest of the guys here, who I'll introduce in a second, and then access to each other, because we want to hear too, what are you guys doing this different? Kind of some big security news that's been happening for the past month. How have you been adapting your own plans? What are you concerned about? What are your priorities? How are those changing? So definitely connect to each other within the chat. Let's keep the conversation going. With that said, I want to kick it around the horn here, do some introductions. Tom, I'm going to start, as always, with you. This is Tom Watson, our Channel Chief Advisor here at Ninja. Hey, Tom.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Really looking forward to this. I know this is a hot topic right now, and looking forward to bringing some of my insights into what MSPs need to do.
Absolutely. Always great to have you, sir. And then we have our special guest. I'm going to start with you, Carrie. Carrie Hendricks. He is Global Operations Director at ID Cyber Solutions. Carrie, you do a little bit of everything. You sent over your list here, and you said you promised you're not trying to brag, but you've got penetration testing, digital forensics investigator, certified incident handler, and also an instructor for all of these things. You're based out of Scotland, and you've got a background with working with the police of Scotland and other places as well. Thank you so much for being on, sir. What else do you want to say there?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, and certainly for asking me to be here. And, as you said, incident response, major issue. And, it's more of an issue that you can't get any, or if you do get any, there's always a better issues there. So, yeah, let's go away and talk about this today.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I do want to add that you're also involved with Cyber Essentials there in the UK as well. So I'm really happy to have you on board and have your expertise and insight here. Okay, next let's kick it over to Mark. So this is Mark Lamb. He is the technical director at M3 Networks Limited, also based in Scotland. And Mark, you are a managed services provider, but you also do incident response yourself. Thanks so much for being here too.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thanks for having me. We're an MSP here in Scotland, MSP and MSSP. I also do incident response as well as a number of other cybersecurity professional services. So excited to join you all today.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, ransomware.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Unfortunate topic, but an extremely important one. People in the audience here who've been following us for a while, you may recognize Mark from a previous live chat we did, not based on security, but based around customer satisfaction. I think he had a 100 CSAT score that we were parading around, and shortly thereafter, you got dinged a little bit. I think that was a plant. I think Tom just posed as a customer and gave you like one bad review.
Told you it was going to happen.
I've been warning you, Mark.
But great to have you back here, Mark. I'm also loving David Levinson here in the chat is saying that they're going the route of replacing computers with paper and pencils. So that's actually, I think that's the advice, and we can just wrap up early, right? No?
Yeah, let's go back to the Stone Age.
Yeah. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, we have Tyler Hudak from TrustedSec. Tyler is the practice lead of the incident response arm of TrustedSec, which I'm sure a lot of people here on the call are familiar with. A very active player in the cybersecurity space and a big contributor in terms of the community as well. Thank you so much, Tyler, for taking time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to talking about everything, with ransomware, we're getting calls every day about that for either organizations to talk about it or who are having issues. So love being able to jump on here and be able to, kind of share, what we see and what we're doing.
After every announcement of a big incident, one of my initial thoughts, when I always think about you, Tyler. I'm always like, well, and inevitably it's a Friday. I'm like, well, there goes Tyler's weekend.
Yep.
But for those of you who have followed us, not just in the live chats, but some of the previous summits that we've done, we had our MSP Security Summit back in January, I believe. It feels like a year ago. Tyler was involved in that as well. I think both years we've done the Security Summit. So thank you so much, Tyler, for coming back on.
Yeah.
Let's kick off with that. Actually, let me bring up our document here. I'm going to share a link to it in the chat. And so, for those who are new to the live chats, we run a pretty loose ship here. But the conversation, we used to call this an agenda doc. The conversation is going to go where it goes. This certainly will not be an ironclad document. But what's important about this doc is it's going to have links to all the resources that we're talking about. And there's a lot of them. So make sure that you keep that link. We'll follow up with an email with this recording and a link to that doc too, and it's going to have links to lots of good resources that we're going to get into in just a second. But I did want to start off, I created a meme here. You probably can't even see this. This is my little contribution to the conversation since I'm not a security expert. You're welcome, everybody. But basically, I just wanted to set the stage a little bit, guys, with Tyler, maybe let's start off with you in terms of the current situation. I mean, you mentioned you're getting calls about ransomware every single day. It's inevitable. Every time we go past a big incident, this becomes a new focus for everybody. There's a lot of renewed cries for improving security across the board. What I've seen that's different, guys, is that there's a cumulative effect here where we've all heard it. All of us here on the call have heard it, that it's not a matter of if, it's when. That detection and response is as important as prevention. I think that's been a rallying call for a while now, but I see that extending outward now, becoming even more of a thing. So it's not just about prevention, even though I do see in the aftermath of the Kaseya incident, for example, a lot of focus on, well, hey, what tools block that? I am seeing lots of responses back to, well, let's just remember those tools blocked it for now. Will they block the next thing? It's unsure. The one thing that is sure is everybody needs to be prepared. Everybody needs to have a response plan. So what does that look like? And that's kind of the big topic we're going to get into today. But with that, I'll stop blabbing and hand it over to you, Tyler. Do you want to talk a little bit more about kind of the current state of things, the lay of the land?
Yeah. So, when I think you need to go back to even like earlier this year, March of this year, when the Hafnium exchange attacks were happening. We since then, and even before then, we've been seeing a lot of attackers, using those attacks to pivot into ransomware. A lot of the VPN vulnerabilities that have come out, and as of recently, with Kaseya, that's a big example of a good supply chain attack. We're just seeing more and more of those things happening, where all these other vulnerabilities are leading to ransomware. Because of that, especially because of Colonial Pipeline, all the executives now in organizations are sitting up and they're taking notice of this. Not that they necessarily weren't before, but I think this has definitely brought it into the spotlight for everybody of realizing that ransomware is truly a bad issue. And the ransomware attacks have not slowed down. DarkSide supposedly went away. Chances are they probably just went to another group after Colonial Pipeline. But if you look at the groups like Are Evil and Prometheus and all the other ones out there, I've lost track of how many there are now out there. They have not slowed down. Ransomware is still going strong, and so it's really just going to continue to be an issue.
Right, absolutely. And I guess in terms of an incident response perspective, there's obviously key differences between responding to ransomware incidents as opposed to other ones. I guess I do want to call it to the audience. What we'll be focusing on here is I think there's some general aspects of incident response. There are general takeaways that can apply in a broader way that we'll definitely cover. But because of the recent activities, especially with the Kaseya stuff, one of the things we're going to focus on here is the idea of a mass ransomware incident. specifically because this is an MSP live chat, and MSPs are targets in a ways and can be affected by these things in a way that other organizations cannot. Any word about that, Tyler, that you wanted to add in terms of MSP specific, the threat there, and maybe your experience recently with incident response for MSPs?
Yeah, I think MSPs, like always, they're a prime target for ransomware attackers. I think when we did the summit together earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, one of the threat actors behind ransomware had come out and said that they were targeting MSPs, or there was some notification that MSPs were specifically being targeted. Because let's face it, MSPs have access into everything. We've worked multiple incidents where the MSP was compromised and then ransomware was just thrown out, very similar to what happened with Kaseya recently. So because of that, it's becoming, I think, more and more critical for organizations for MSP organizations to protect their data. Some of these things, like with Kaseya, if I remember right, this was a 0-day that affected it. So you can only protect yourself so much with that. But there are definitely other things that can be done to help protect you and your clients. Because in the end, the MSP isn't necessarily going to be the only victim in this. All of their clients are going to be hit, and that translates not only to monetary losses but also reputational losses. We've seen a lot of clients who got hit through Kaseya have already moved away from them, have already started to move away from their MSPs and into other organizations because of that.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of hit close home to me. The animal hospital in the tiny town I'm in New York, Maine, was one of the victims there. Made front page in the newspaper. So yeah, I mean, the victims here were widespread, and it's really heartbreaking to see. Let's take a step back and talk about what we want to cover here. And in the chat, guys, feel free to chime in if there's specific things about what I'm about to say that you want to dive into further. But basically, the questions I see when we were talking about incident response that I'm seeing from MSPs is really around, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities? Because we're getting into an area where it's not just the MSP involved. Of course, when we're talking about these attacks and we're talking about incident response, we also have to talk about the insurance providers. That's a whole nother element where your insurance provider, if you haven't had a discussion with them to really get these details down, you should, absolutely, because often they will have a list of approved incident response providers that they will have work with you. And so I'm going to kick it over to you, Carrie, to talk a little bit about this in terms of one of the big questions I see is, where does an MSP's, in the immediate aftermath of an incident happening, where does the MSP's responsibilities and work end and an incident response handler or provider's responsibilities kind of begin? Can you give a little clarity on that?
Yeah, of course. The real issue in terms of when an incident responder arrives at a incident is that they don't even know the network, they don't know anything about it, and so on. So they would have to rely on somebody to provide some information about that. Now, similarly, with the insurance company, if they need to know at what kind of baseline your organization was before it got attacked. So it'll depend on whether, how much money they're actually going to spend getting you back on the road. But in terms of insurance-wise, the things that we've seen so far is that they would try to help you at first, and then if things weren't maintained properly and so on, then there is definitely an issue. Now, in terms of, I won't say who to allocate blame to, but they're always going to look for, like, where did it go wrong? What was the cause and stuff like this. So if you're the MSP that weren't quite as diligent as keeping the standards up and everything else, then that's going to fall squarely on you as the service provider, because, well, that's the service you provided. So you're going to have the process where the business's insurance company would like to try to rectify that, but they're going to try and work through a issue with the provision of services. So, and the other thing I should be reminded as well is if they were to send a basically an external incident responder, they will know nothing. They will know nothing about the situation apart from, right, what happened, where do we start, and start pulling stuff out. So, yeah, it's a lot of stuff that's needing to be provided and maintained by loads of folks. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a good starting point for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, maybe we can get some clarity around that too, of what, I know, Tyler, this is something we covered in previous calls, of what an MSP can do to prepare. So whenever there's a handoff happening of information, how can everybody work together? What information needs to be provided to make things go smoothly? Mark, I want to kick it over to you for a second. Of course, you are an MSP yourself, but you also are an incident responder. You give us some clarity around some incidents you've handled and kind of some of the how things work with roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, so following on from what Carrie said, I think the natural fear for any MSP and for much of the audience here is, like, this is going to be the end of me, like that fear sets in. Carrie and I often talk about, particularly Carrie talks about the 5 stages of grief, right? And certainly at the beginning, the MSP is going through the same, right? They're shocked. They're worrying what this is going to mean, particularly, with the Kaseya VSA attack. That's a whole other level, right? When, all your clients potentially are destroyed by ransomware and you're left holding the baby. I'd say that the most important thing you need to do, first of all, is just slow down, take a breath, and realize that, it's done. The horse is already bolted. There's very little you're going to be able to do. If you're going to think about something crazy like trying to cover it up or trying to cover the tracks or trying to reconfigure configuration to make it look like everything was all right, I mean, it's futile, because anyone coming in behind you as an incident responder is going to find that, right? Particularly if ransomware has cleared logs, and the next thing we have is just logs where everything's getting switched back on or reconfigured. So I would say that you need to be, in that moment, it's too late. We talk a lot about preparation and incident response, and that's absolutely where everyone's mind needs to be right now and continue to be in that space. But getting on to how you handle an incident and what an MSP's responsibility should be, I'd say the first and foremost thing they should be doing is preserving that volatile evidence, right? Keeping machines online, not shutting systems down, making sure that whatever's required to investigate the incident is retained, and getting ready to, as Carrie said, be able to support and assist that first incident responder and being able to get, boots on the ground, understanding what we're dealing with, understanding what this infrastructure looks like. Anything like schematics in Cyber Essentials in the UK, we call it boundary of scope, similar types of things. And that's really going to help speed up the process.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you did bring up how a scenario where we're talking about a mass ransomware scenario, it really does amp up everything. We're going to get into exactly how that is and some specific suggestions for that scenario in just a little bit. But I've dropped a poll in here. I just kind of want to back up for everybody and get a lay of the land here on the call. So everybody check the poll. Do you have a documented IR plan in place? Yes, no, working on it. I see this is something that folks are actively kind of working on. But yeah, we'd be interested to get people's thoughts there. Mark, you've got a template that we can walk through. We can pull it up in just a little bit. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you about that moment. Okay, so you're going through the 5 stages of grief. There's the initial shock and this cannot be happening kind of reaction. But then, what do you suggest in terms of what are some initial actions that MSPs should be taking while they're waiting for an incident response provider to be showing up, if that's in fact what's going to be happening? We talked about this in our prep call a little bit, and you kind of had an interesting idea about having someone on staff who is prepared to be kind of a first aid responder that I believe you said kind of puts the clamp on until the real medics can get there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer that every MSP needs to have, where we were talking about like a first aider, right? You've got to have a first aider to get ready for the ambulance turning up to save their life. And I think in incident response, every MSP needs to have that too. You need to understand now what process you're now in and where you fit in that overall cycle so that you can contribute to that. And as part of that, a big part of that is just really is communication as well, right? Communicating with the customer and letting them know what we're dealing with here. We see all the time where no one wants to give the customer bad news, or they don't want to drop it and say, like, this is what we're facing. And of course, you don't want to also put your foot in it. I would say that depending on how high profile the customer is as well, you want to be communicating with the customer how serious this is and what the reality of the situation is, and making sure that they themselves don't go and stick their foot in it. We see it, I'm sure Tyler sees it all the time as well, right? People get involved in an incident and the first thing they do is get onto social and say, we'll be back up in a couple of hours. It's like, that ain't happening. You're just setting yourself up for failure here. And you're better to be aware of what you're dealing with now so that they can make sure that they say the right things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. There's a really good example of that with, I apologize, I can't remember. It was one of the healthcare big hospital systems out west in Western U.S. They got hit with ransomware earlier this year, and when that was happening, all of their employees were getting on like Reddit and posting screenshots of the systems being down and things like that. So with what you were saying, you absolutely want to have that good communication plan in place already on how to get ahead of the communications, how to get ahead of the story so that you can tell your clients and keep them informed. Because another thing too is your clients may have contractual obligations to their clients to notify them as well. And so if they're waiting for you to tell them what's going on, they may be actually becoming in breach of their own contracts. So it becomes very tricky to do that. And in our experience, having those IR plans and policies in place prior to any type of incident is really key. And not only having them in place, testing them out, doing that tabletop exercise, that mock scenario to go through and, make sure that it works the way you expect it to, that everything there is covered, that you're not finding any gaps.
Yeah, great point. And we can jump to communication here for a second because it's definitely an important topic. I wonder too if there's something to the fact that just overall in general, right? We all expect more rapid communication and more rapid response across the board, not just security-wise, but from our vendors, from companies in general. We expect to have up-to-date information all the time. That's why we go to Twitter. We don't wait for the news, right, on TV or something. And so, yeah, having all that planned out, that's the only way you're going to accomplish that, right? You can't just be reactive and get things going, or you could end up saying the wrong thing, to Mark's point. I will say there's one example, and I called this out in the doc, of a company, an MSP based in the Netherlands. And you can go into that resources doc and check out that link to see it yourselves. But I thought that they actually had a pretty good basic communication system down where they were using their blog and they were providing regular updates. They were not only providing regular updates, but being very clear about when the next update was going to be. And they took a very transparent approach to everything. And I think the benefit there is that you're not leaving people guessing. You're letting people know you're absolutely on it. Because it seems like the worst thing you can do is go dark, right?
Yeah.
You've seen it with Huntress, right? When the Kaseya VSA attack was going on, they had the Reddit thread, right? And they did something fantastic. They've done a fantastic example of this, where they said they started setting expectations, which is the next thing after you're starting to get honest and tell somebody what's happened. Is let them know when to expect to hear from you next. I'm sure I've seen a comment on the Huntress's thread saying we will be devoting 60% of our time to investigating the incident, 40% to communicating, or something along those lines, and to expect updates.
Oh, it looks like he left us on a cliffhanger. Hopefully you'll be back in a second, Mark. You're lagging just a little bit. While that's happening, let me pull something up and you guys can react to this, okay? Okay, check this out. So this is something, actually, we bring up Huntress. We had a webinar that we did with Huntress back in 2019. which is a year when there was really kind of seen for the first time these mass ransomware incidents impacting MSP vendors and MSPs. And so we took a stab at making some clear roles and responsibilities. And Tyler and Kira, I'm interested in your comments on this specifically. There's the incident response provider that's external coming in. Their job isn't to communicate with your clients, right? Like their job is not to talk with your own insurance provider and your lawyer, right? And to distribute things within your own staff. They have a very particular role. And so we kind of wanted to get into like, okay, as an MSP, just drilling that home of you're not going to be responsible for every aspect of this. So let's get some clarity around what you do want to control and how you're going to break that down across your team. And so we took a stab at, there's a leadership, maybe we say CEO, COO here, but maybe it's better described as leadership. There's some items there. If you have sales and marketing or any non-technical staff, great opportunity for them to get involved with communications. And then, of course, you got your technicians who are responsible maybe for that initial containment restoration. And then we broke those down into 2 individual checklists here. But Tyler, I'll put you on the spot. Just looking at this, glancing at this, I haven't given you a chance to read this actually. But any thoughts there about those overall roles? Is that basically right, or is there anything you'd add there?
No, I think overall it's basically right. What I would add into that is, first off, those definitions of whose responsibility it is to do different things should be in your incident response plan. Every organization should have an incident response plan which defines multiple things, such as the overall workflow for how an incident works, whose responsibility is to do things. It might call out to other documents in your organization and so on, but that needs to be there. The other thing that I mentioned too is, especially around communications, if you don't have the expertise in-house, then go find the expertise. The IR team, you are absolutely right with what you said, that the IR team is not going to be doing communications. When we get pulled into an incident, when my team gets pulled into an incident, if we're asked, well, how do we respond to this? Our first response is go talk to your legal team. Because we cannot answer that. We're not the experts in that. If they're not the experts in that, there are lots of really, really good crisis communications firms out there who are experts in this. And that would be, my biggest takeaway from that is, if you don't have that, go find somebody who does. Your cyber insurance company might provide that for you, and they might not. So it's something that you want to find before the incident happens, not during the incident.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring up the incident response plan template that Mark provided, but I want to make sure that Mark is actually with us when we do that. So while we're waiting for Mark to come back on, let's address this one question that we got from Sandra. Sandra, great to see you here. Thanks so much for the question. It's a great one. This is such a common question. Tyler, you want to take this one? Do you keep machines online? For the longest time I heard, like, you yank the cord, right? That's what you do when there's ransomware. What are you supposed to do?
So it depends what you mean by keep them online. Our recommendation is, because there is so much data you can get from volatile memory that gets lost when you shut down a system, if you can keep it online, like powered up, but disconnected from the network, that is the best thing that you can do. So for example, for a VM, that might be pausing the VM. That might be disabling the virtual NIC. For workstations, that would be disabling, pulling the Ethernet cord, or more likely on wireless, you probably have to disable wireless, or on the switch blocking that MAC address. That is the best thing you can do, because then the incident response team can come in and they can grab memory. And unfortunately, sometimes some of those artifacts to answer the questions that the company is inevitably going to happen or have can only be found in memory or in volatile space that gets lost when you shut down that system. Another thing to kind of keep in mind too is there are some ransomware. REvil can do this, where they don't actually start encrypting until you reboot that system. And so, you need to be careful with what you do. Just because you shut down a system doesn't mean you're safe, doesn't mean that your data is being protected. Now, that being said, if we were to go to an organization and, the only thing that they can do to protect themselves is to shut down the system, then do it. If you have a decent incident response team, they're going to still be able to recover some artifacts. You may not be able to answer everything, but with a ransomware incident, your first priority should be containment. And sometimes if that means you have to shut down the system, that's what it is.
Thank you for that, Tyler. Mark, you're back. Anything that you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. I think the word to change the word you use, I think, is isolate rather than to kill the machine, or to pull it out or leave it live, so to speak. Just like Tyler was saying, it's essential that you maintain as much as possible. That's probably a good point to bring in. About things people can be doing now is logging, having logs that are independent of those systems, right? Because often, like we see with many ransomware attacks, they wipe the logs, and they're gone, and then someone pulls the power, and then we turn it back on, and we're like, oh yeah, we're ransomware, and we've got nothing. What do we do? What strain of ransomware is this, right? And then they're trying to find it, and then you've got nothing, So logs from your firewalls, logs from switches, wireless access points, computers, servers, anything and everything. Log stashing is really important. I know you've got some of this in your agenda doc as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. I can bring that back up. I mean, there's a list. In fact, yeah. I'll do that right now. Let me share my screen again. And again, this is something that we created to address not just ransomware in terms of an individual case, but basically, a case where you have to prepare for all of your clients being hit at once, right? And so stalling a little bit, I'm going to pull up and make this the focus again. This is a checklist that we have down here at the bottom of this doc. I'll share the link in here again. And we've actually got a PDF that we'll give you too. But yeah, 12 ways that you can start now, right? And so the first one is get a basic IR plan documented, right? And we'll go over the template in just a second. Tyler mentioned tabletop, so actually practice it, because then that's when you're going to know. Matt Fox is on the line in the chat here. He pointed this out. The second you tabletop that thing, you're going to realize your plan actually isn't that great. And then you're going to adjust things. But go back, test backups at scale. This is an important thing I saw in discussions after the Kaseya incident, where you've maybe tested individual backups, but this goes to your point, Mark, about if you're dealing with all of your clients having incidents at the same time, that's a whole different ball game. And this is one of the clear aspects where you can handle doing a couple things, but what about at scale? So we're not talking about a dozen; we're talking about hundreds of machines. What's that going to look like for you guys? Get a true sense of recovery time. I shared this doc with a Slack group, and Jason Slagle, who's really active in the community and a guy who's big on security, pointed out that's one that needs to be stressed. Because, like you guys were saying, making those promises, hey, we'll be back up in the afternoon. How do you even know that? And if you put that out there and you don't have a true sense of what it's actually going to take, you're just setting bad expectations. I don't need to read through all of these. I guess I'll get to the point of the logging. Tyler and Carrie, I'll let you bring this up too, because both of you guys have in our conversations have mentioned, if you guys show up and there's no logging, that's an issue. And so how do you understand what you should be logging? There's some cheats, logging checklists, and then a cool guide from TrustedSec that Tyler has shared in previous things. I dropped links for those in here as well. Carrie, any other point about the logging you want to make?
Well, the thing is, in terms of, if I was just to look at my screen here, and these is the kind of basic things. Being able to describe what it is you're going to be looking at, in terms of which machines are normal, which ones are not. The next step, being able to collect the evidence, and that may be network evidence, that may be host log file evidence, and maybe loads of different other bits of, other like memory and so on. And then while you're collected all those things, have a process in place to be able to look at that evidence, have a practiced approach on, right, we're going to look at the log files. Have we got a couple of kind of queries ready that we can quickly run against the data, or do we have a method of doing this really, really quickly? Because all of these things done, as everybody's pointed out, this is part of the plan. If you're stuck on your plan, it greatly impedes the speed you're going to be going at. So it's it's vitally important to be able to have the things to do the investigation. So quite a lot of the incidents that we've responded to, there's been several things that's been overlooked. And if that had been a table exercise, for example, a scenario that they've actually practiced and worked through, they would have realized, oh, hold on a minute, we're missing some major pieces of the puzzle here. And what we've got isn't really going to be that helpful, because you won't be able to say how long ago the actual attack actually happened, because it may be months and months ago.
Absolutely. Great point. So definitely everyone check out the doc for those links to the logs. I mean, one other suggestion that I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on was, should you be logging on, should you be segmenting those logs away? So in the case of an attack, those aren't going to get messed up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You should definitely aggregate all your logs somewhere safe. So whether it's something like Graylog or whatever the case may be, don't rely on the machines themselves to contain the evidence themselves, because you'll quickly learn that that idea goes out the window really, really quick, and you wish you had actually aggregated them something else. So I don't know if any of the other guys want to add something in, Hayden?
I just couldn't agree with that more. We get into a lot of incidents where we go in where there's no centralized logging, and that really limits what you can do. Like Mark said, you want to centralize these logs as much as possible, because the attackers routinely, when they get on a system, especially the key systems that they use during a ransomware attack, they are going to remove those logs. That's one of the first things that they do. And if they don't remove the logs, if you have not gone through and modified the default Windows policy, depending on the server, you may have like 10 minutes worth of logs there. And so because of that severely sometimes hampers an investigation in order to determine things like root cause and what user IDs the attacker is using to move laterally through the network, and did they take data, things like that.
Hey, Tyler, let me ask you this. We have a good question from Jeff. He's bringing up customers want RTO, right? So can you give any insight, without naming names, of course, of you're working an incident. Your job is to figure out what happened, to contain, to eradicate. You've got. I can maybe pull up a slide that shows your good steps that you've outlined for incident response. But then the MSP that you're working with is feeling pressures from their clients, or any company you're working with that feels pressure from their customers and whatever, of getting things back up as quickly as possible, obviously. How does that, is there friction there in some cases? Because I guess who makes the call of when things are safe to safe to be brought back online?
Yeah, there's absolutely friction during that, at least in my experience. There's always a kind of butting of heads of, we need to bring everything back up as quickly as possible versus we need to figure out what happened so this doesn't happen again. And depending on a organization's business continuity or disaster recovery processes, or how they're going about doing that, in order to bring systems back up, they may not have the resources to bring them up separately. So you're destroying evidence as you're bringing systems up. In terms of kind of post-recovery RTO, I can tell you I've worked some incidents where it takes 6 months or more to fully recover from a ransomware attack. That is not uncommon. I think a lot of people are under the false impression, or a lot of organizations are under the false impression that, if we pay the ransom and we get our data back, then we're done. That is totally not true. If you go through and you recover things, that is going to take a while to do. It's not a overnight thing. Even if you pay the ransom and you get that decryption program, the encryption programs work very well. I've seen them encrypt entire file systems, like multi-gigabyte, 100 plus gigabyte file systems in about 5 minutes. The decryption of that same file system took about 36 hours. So, and plus you're not getting all your files back. It's just a fact. So you have to take that into account. And jumping back to the document that you had, the kind of 10 or 12 things to keep in mind, the testing your backups at scale, I love that because most organizations don't do that. And one of the things that I found too is, so let's say like 50% of your workstations got compromised. Most organizations, they don't back up their workstations. Their thought process is, oh, if we need to restore a workstation, we'll just re-image it. All right, that's great. How are you going to re-image 500 workstations? You cannot do that at the same time. So you need to test that at scale as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna kick this over to Tom in just a second. Sorry, Tom. I just wanted to add one thing that Ray pointed out before it gets lost. Kind of tying into this with communications and him making the point of he likes the idea of promising when the next update is, when the next communication is, versus promising based around when the next recovery step actually will be, which I thought was kind of interesting. But Tom, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Actually, that's what I was going to say too. I like what Ray was saying about that. And I would say with any kind of down system, tell them when the next communication is coming and include some information so they are in on it, where you show them something positive that is moved forward towards resolution, but not giving promises, especially when there's so many variables that are out of your control and you don't know. But if you could include just a tidbit of we were able to do this, or we were able to isolate it, or we were able to figure out the breadth of the infection, and then communicate that, so you're constantly moving the ball forward, and the client sees that, and they will usually back off a little bit and not want to know an absolute day and time that's going to be resolved. That's such a
great point. I mean, there is for maybe it's kind of weird to say, but there could be some silver linings here in terms of if you show, if you've had the conversation with your clients that, hey, the state of the world that we're in is that everyone's under attack. It's more of a situation of when, not if. If you've had that conversation, and then you can show them, if that does happen, that you're with them and that you're on the ball, you've had a plan, it's clear that you document that beforehand, that you practiced, and now you're executing and doing everything that Tom said. I mean, you could come out of this with more customer loyalty versus the damage that Tyler referenced earlier for situations that don't go well. Because I think it's so much of it is you're not going to dodge all the bullets forever. It's about how can you respond to them, right? And Jonathan, what you do and communicate during that.
And Jonathan, the unknowns of it. A lot of times, remember, you're thinking on this very high technical level. You have a lot more knowledge of what's happened and how these go down. And just taking a small piece of that and laying out for whiteboarding it or somehow showing them, hey, here's what's happened and here's where we are. My feeling is that clients then, if they feel like they're included in the process and knowledge, that they'll be a lot more reasonable with their expectations.
That's a perfect point. David, thank you so much for this. Larger clients, consider having a web page that the client can refer to see the status of their recovery. I don't know what how much detail you want to provide there, but having that one page where you can be posting all that stuff seems like a great idea. Maybe there's other specifics we could talk about too, with what can you do in terms of prep, doing all this stuff in advance, right, or having it at the ready, so you know that you can have your voicemails delivering messages. That you've got an email autoresponder response that's giving updates too. Anything that can let you as an owner, if you're the owner, and let your technicians focus on recovery work versus responding to 100,000 emails, whatever. We got about 15 minutes left. There's some questions coming in, and we still want to show off the incident response plan because I think it's a great thing to do. Before we do that, I keep on dangling it out there. I promise I'm not doing that on purpose. But there's one last couple notes on that list that Tyler, that you mentioned too, that's in that doc. Talking with your insurance provider, obviously a good idea. Talking with your lawyer, and then talking with your vendors. We got a lot of questions after the Kaseya incident from our partners, and we ended up hosting a Ninja partner security forum to help address those. and partners wanted to know, what's your plan? Are you guys ready for if this happens to you? And so we were able to have a good discussion around that and share things with our partners that involved our chief security officer and CTO and others. It's a great conversation to be having right now, to be pushing for. There's also one thing, Mark, you mentioned the Huntress and the Kaseya stuff and the response there. There's another aspect of it where they were trying to match make MSPs together, so people who were affected, smaller shops who did not have capacity to deal with all of their clients being infected with ransomware at once, they were trying to connect them with local other MSPs who were willing to help. And the response to that was incredible. I mean, it was one of those silver lining things where it's like, man, the community is an amazing place. And so that's something too, you like to think that would happen with everything, but why not be proactive? You probably have some shops. I know Tom talks about back in the day, he ended up being best friends with one of his big competitors for a while anyway. But yeah, I mean, reaching out to some other local shops and coming to agreement like, hey, we're going to help each other out if something like this happens, because this is it's bigger than all of us, right? With that said, Mark, let's kick it over to you, buddy. And I'm going to bring up your incident response template. And you want to kind of walk through some of it?
Yeah, there's a lot there, but I'll try and cover off the key points and some of the key details. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'm going to pull it up, and just to I'm going to let you also speak to your ask. And so before we go through this, so this is a Word doc that Mark put together. Mark, in addition to being an MSP, MSSP, is also working on a product too. That he's going to be releasing, and he's in the early stages of that. So he's looking for some help getting some feedback on it, specifically from MSPs. So Mark showed us this incident response plan template. It's awesome. Our immediate thing was like, if we showed this, people are going to want it. Can we give it to people? And Mark said, yes, absolutely. He has one favor to ask. Can you guys, if you download this, I've got a link I'll share with you in just a second. If you download it, agree to be registered to be on Mark's kind of focus group, an MSP focus group. I think it's a pretty small ask to make. Mark may not be asking on all of you. We got a lot of people on the call here, a lot of downloads. But Mark, anything else you want to say about that before we get into the doc?
No, no, you're right. So we've been developing a product. You'll see the name in the plan if you download it. The product is called CyberCare Vision. We will likely rebrand the product before it launches, so it may come under a new name. But it's a cybersecurity visualization tool designed to deliver cybersecurity posture information to C-suite of an organization in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that they like to receive information, and also to guide you through the very complicated area of GRC, governance, risk and compliance. What sort of things should you be doing with all these different standards? And to coin a ConnectWise phrase, paint it green. And just make it green, and I'll take care of a lot of these key things. And we'll be offering a lot of free resources as part of that as well. And this is one of them.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And I just dropped a link to a landing page, guys, where you can download that, and you'll see some language. So if you have any questions, just let us know. And David, you're asking a question about charging. Mark, I'll let you answer that if you want to in the comments. But let's dig into this doc because we don't have a ton of time here. So everyone by this point on board, we need to have an incident response plan, right? Let's check back at that poll. We got mostly people working on it. So as you're working on it, would a template be helpful? Here you go. Here's a template. Here's something you can check out. What should be actually in an incident response plan? And Carrie, Tyler, feel free to jump in here too, and Tom as well. But Mark, why don't you take it away? Maybe at high level, a speed run through the doc, if you will.
Absolutely right. So if you scroll down to executive support, let's go down a little bit more. Actually, sorry. Let's start this again. Go back to the title page.
Okay, back to the title page. Sorry. Whoop. There we go.
Would it be easier for me to share my screen?
Yeah, probably.
It'll be easier that way.
Do you have the doc up?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, let me close this bell and you'll be able to share it. Okay, and while we're doing that, let's look at a question here. Sandra, we got yours. We touched on logs, why they're important, I believe. We got some more specific log questions. We can answer that. Why did it take 6 months to recover from ransomware? I mean, that's a whole thing, Tyler, you can get into too. Okay, Mark, you've got it. You've had your water. You're getting ready to be like, speed talker. Here we go.
Gonna go for it. Yeah. So the first thing to point out about this incident response plan and any incident response plan is that it's a fallacy to think that you can come up with one plan that's going to deal with every type of situation and scenario. For me, those things are what we would call, run books or standard operating procedures, things that are specific about how we do specific things. So you could have a playbook, run book, SOP, anything, whatever you want to use to describe, for example, how do we recover from 1 ransomware attack, 5 ransomware attacks, 10, or how do we deal with a business email compromise attack, supply chain attack, so on and so forth, whatever it may be. You should have separate run books for those things. The plan, talking a lot of the points that Tyler and Carrie have made on the call today, is much more about how are we going to communicate? Who's responsible? How do we know when we're going to activate this plan? It should be clear. Priority levels. There's been conversations in the chat about recovery time objectives. Again, having that answered by your customers or running through this with your customers is essential. It creates the plan, which we will use the plan along with any given runbook to respond to any given incident. Right. So that's effectively the framework of the document. I'll call out a few key things, but honestly, this could take ages to go through it in its entirety. So we'll go over some of the key things. So we've got some of the document control at the top, revision history and approvals. This is essential that when should you be reviewing an incident response plan? We all talk about, it should be done at 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever. But actually, what about things such as changing your executive leadership within the organization? It's important that these people are obviously involved, and any change there, these things should be reviewed. Also, who approves the documents, right? It's all right having a document, but when you kick off your incident response plan, and no one actually, you start executing steps that no one said we can't be doing that, this should be approved. Everyone in the C-suite and others should be aware of what's in this, and therefore they should have read it and approved the document. Same as well as who should the document be distributed to. So if there's any changes in this document in the future, who should know about it? And also who had a hand in creating it. So we've got the document contributors as well. So moving on to process description, what are the key steps in process of incident response? Incident priority levels and restoration times by criticality. So how do we grade an incident? How do we determine what is a P1 all the way through to a P7 or an exercise or whatever it may be? And what are the recovery time objectives for those as well? It's important that the customer knows how you're going to grade them. It's a bit in the IT world, it's saying, the printer's down and we're saying that's not a high priority for you, right? And the same thing in cybersecurity. What if you're facing multiple types of attacks with your customers, or your customers facing? It's not uncommon for an organization to be, suspect an attack. You get involved in an incident and find out there's actually another one going on at the same time. I'm sure that a few of us have been in that situation. Plan activation criteria. How are we going to execute this plan? Who's going to be responsible for maintaining this plan? How are we going to communicate in the event of an incident? So, of course, you've got to imagine, or you've got to assume that your communication channels are also going to be compromised. So you need to have preferred communication channels, but you also need to have out-of-band communication channels. And you need to know what those are going to be. And that feeds in nicely to key contact information, because you're going to need to have contact information for in and out-of-band communication with any of these individuals and these key organizations. You've got some in here such as legal counsel, insurance providers, recovery providers, so on and so forth. And for MSPs, some of that might also be MSSPs who are going to be involved, as well as any regulatory organizations, any stakeholders. If there's shareholders in the organization, need to be aware of this plan and be made aware of an incident if it should happen. Moving on to service owners. So who has ownership in the organization of very specific types of roles. So who's involved in monitoring security, who does pen testing, who does security configuration. You may want to add a few into here as well. And what are the essential roles and alternates in the event of a cybersecurity incident? So, who's going to handle communications? Who's going to handle, for example, looking at memory dumps and looking for logs? Who's going to be the person to handle the process, which is going to be separate to actually looking at log files and so on and so forth? Then documenting some of well, not some, documenting your information assets. So what are your key assets from an information perspective? Where do they locate? Where are they located logically? Where are they located physically? And how often are they backed up? And any IR considerations that should be taken into account for those. And then also moving on to technology assets and doing the same thing again. It's important that we split the information asset from the technology asset because they are, in many cases, different. Finally, moving on to primary and alternate sites. So what are your primary sites and your failover sites going to be? Which, of course, if you're doing BCDR planning, you should have this type of information already, but it's succinctly kept within this document. And any other plans of action that are going to be essential to this plan. So you're going to have that this plan is going to feed into others. For example, a communications plan, a disaster recovery plan, any emergency procurement, transportation, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a whistle-stop tour of the plan. But there's a lot here, and everything's worked with examples. Anything that's highlighted in yellow is for you to change. Anything which is in purple is an explanation as to what you should be doing here, and anything in black italics is example data, which will hopefully kind of put pen to paper and get you started.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for going through that, Mark, because I know, like I said, when you and Tom and I and Carrie were all talking yesterday, Tom and I saw that and our eyes lit up and we're like, oh man, this is gold. Because, you know, all this stuff, when you're talking about the concepts of it, it's just helpful to have an example, a hard example for people to be able to look at. So thank you so much for sharing that and making it available. And definitely... we'll include how to get it. I'll also I'll drop a link to Cybercare Vision right here in the chat too, so people can check it out. And know
I'm conscious if Carrie or Tyler would have anything to add to that, because I think one thing to say is that everyone can have a different opinion on what should be in an IR plan, and there can always be additional points added. It can always be improved. So I wouldn't take it as gold, it's gospel. Tyler, Carrie, you guys got anything you want to add to that?
I love this. You know, when we do tabletop exercises, we look at IR plans. And so a lot of the things that I see missing from IR plans, you have in your template. So it's an amazing start. You're right. Every organization is going to be different. Their needs are going to be different. They may not be able to fill out everything, but yeah, I think what you have here in this template is honestly amazing. I'm going to start pointing people to it.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice. There you go. And Carrie, because we're actually right here at the time here, I'll give a couple, if you guys don't mind hanging on for another 5 minutes, we can answer some of these few questions we got. But Carrie, I'm just curious, anything that you think, I mean, this is such a big topic. Anything else that we didn't cover that you think we should, or that you want people to kind of leave with in terms of a takeaway?
Well, don't assume that whoever's coming to help you will be able to help you straight away. Right, so just rather think of it as, you know, at base case, this is, or worst case rather, this is the emergency plumber that shows up at 2:00 in the morning. You know, so he's not going to fix anything, but he's just there to limit the damage that is actually going on, and the recovery process may actually be handed over to yet another team once that initial triage bit has been done. You know, and kudos to Mark on that particular document as well. It covers everything. So when the emergency plumber does arrive, you know, we can have a quick look and see, right, what's been done, where we are, you know, what are we looking at, and so on. So, but I think the best thing is have a plan, practice the plan, change the plan, and improve the plan rather.
Absolutely, and we actually have a question. Oh, Mark, you answered it in the chat. But yeah, basically people wanting to know, like, where can they turn to you for help? Because I mean, this is the big takeaway I would say, and I'm sure Tom, you would echo this, that these questions and these conversations, I mean, this is the time to address this stuff, right? Reaching out to insurance providers, having conversations with IR handlers, having conversations with your own team and peers. All this stuff used to have. You don't want to be having that on, you know, Friday at midnight or the next day at 10 a.m. when you wake up and you thought you were going to have a good weekend. You know, you want to have it now, and so you can be prepared.
Jonathan, I had just one perspective on this
Absolutely.
too. We haven't really discussed here is that there is opportunity here. This is front and center on clients' minds. They're seeing the news. They know it's a problem. They know they have to deal with it. It's not like it was years ago where you talked about security and they were just like, who cares? We haven't had a problem. They know it can happen. If you have a good plan of instant response, if you have a really good security stack, you can probably go to those clients and ask them for more money if you show them that you have a way that you're going to deal with security effectively. So I would say don't be down on this. Look at it as a way to learn new information and to monetize it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there's a lot of services that need to be happening that across the board with the security stack, and maybe some people that you're connecting with, such as the guys on the call here, where it's not just what you're providing, you're also getting in line with expert services that are going to be on demand, and that stuff costs money, but it's costs that can be passed on to the clients in some cases for sure. Tyler, well, actually, okay, so let's get, before we let people jump here, first of all, everyone in the audience who does need to jump, thank you so much for calling in, getting back here with the live chats. Hopefully you found this interesting. Like I mentioned, we'll be following up with an email that has the recording, link to all these resources, so thank you again for that. But if you have another minute here, there were a couple questions around logging that just want to touch on if we can. And let's start from Tim. What elements of the log files do you recommend aggregating? All logins, failed logins, errors, warnings? Like, is there some structure around that, or is it everything basically? Tyler, any suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some structure around that. I would start with the logging cheat sheets and checklists that are in the document, and just start from there. If I had an ideal situation, anything authentication related, I would want centrally logged. Anything process creation related, I would want centrally logged. And then from there, it kind of comes down to where you're logging it. The next step after centralized logging is setting up alerting around that. So it really depends then, what do you want to be alerting on, and are you getting the right logs in order to do that? So for example, let's say you wanted to make sure that you could detect the print nightmare attacks. You need to make sure that those logs are going in there. And in order to do that, you need to do research into what those logs are. If you want kind of like a quick win in order to do that, or a quick way to do that, you really want what's called a purple team test, which is where a red team comes into your environment and they are sitting with your blue team, or you have a separate blue team come in, and as the red team does an attack, the blue team is watching your centralized logging, your SIM, whatever you have, in order to make sure that it's detecting it properly and those alerts are going off. Otherwise, you kind of just need to go through and figure out what you are most concerned with. But if you're going to start off, I would say, start off with authentication-based alerts if you had to do it at a minimum. Basically, things that are going to detect like brute force attacks, so many failed authentications within a short period of time, and things like that.
Mark, I'm going to kick it over to you for a last word. Any other takeaways here? Aside from check out the incident response plan, have one, use that as a template, actually put it together, actually practice it. Anything else that you want to give to people as a takeaway from this?
Yeah, two things. Number one, speak to your customers. Right, they have to know that this can happen. Right, I think it's better that you have that conversation now than have it after the event and try to explain to them that this could have occurred. And any failure to invest in certain technologies, whether it be security, disaster recovery, will be laid bare when this happens. You don't want them to pin it all on you when part of it was their responsibility for not doing it. That would be the first thing. And secondly, as we talked about in our prep call, Jonathan, I'm a big believer that MSPs need to get together on this. Right? They need to come together and be able to support one another. It was great what Huntress did, but it shouldn't really take that. That isn't really in the eye of preparation and getting ready for an attack like this. And I think one key thing about this is that these groups, these cohorts of MSPs that get together, I think they need to be making sure that they're using disparate products. We don't want everyone on Kaseya, everyone on Ninja, right? Because how are you going to help each other if you're all taken out at the same time?
Oh man, I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's one thing I don't have in that list that I absolutely need to add. So it'll be lucky number 13 ways you can prepare is exactly that point. I mean, I saw in chats and discussions people asking, especially in this case, Kaseya users, what do we use right now for getting supporting our clients? Like, how are we getting access? Like, what are other tools we can use? We can't use Kaseya right now, and in that case, it was 10 days, right? So, I mean, having another tool in mind is definitely, and it could be a cheaper free one or whatever, but having another tool in mind, redundancy there seems like a really good, important thing to be prepping too. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay, well, with that, I want to plug a couple of things we have upcoming before we all sign out here. And the first one is we have another event happening next Thursday. And so we were quiet here with our chats for a little while, but we're hitting you back up with another event very soon. And that's as early as actually next Thursday. And so check it out. You may have seen this. You probably have gotten my emails bugging you about this, guys. But we're having an event that we are hosting with quite a few guys. You saw Ray from OIT VoIP here on the chat. Thank you, Ray, as always, for calling in. Ray, OIT is going to be there. Ray will be there. We got Lifecycle Insights. We do have Huntress, Jason Slagle from CNWR, and of course ourselves. We're going to be hosting this Jurassic SOC a cybersecurity adventure. This is a tabletop exercise, and of course, we're going to be having some fun with this one, but there's going to be absolutely real-world takeaways from it. It's a chance to kind of get in that mindset of what thinking about a tabletop and what questions you're asking and can actually look like. And it's going to be a good time. If you were tuning in back in May, we had a Star Wars themed one. Now we're doing Jurassic SOC. You may even see some dinosaurs. Yeah, exactly, Matt. You may see Sean Larder from OIT getting eaten by a few dinosaurs. We'll see. You'll have to tune in to find out. But I wanted to call that out. That's happening, again, next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's something to check out. And then going back to, let's see, our next live chat is going to be the following Thursday after that. I believe it's August 5th. And Tom, I'm going to cue you up here. We're going to be talking about something you developed. We're going to get away from security. We've been talking a lot about security. We're going to go back to talking about pricing and profitability. Do you want to tee that up a little bit?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Last year, we put out a cost calculator that was based on one that I used in my MSP days to figure out what your stack should be, how much that's going to cost you, how much you should charge for managed service agreements. Well, in the past 6 months, in working with an MSP who's going to be on, Ross Danham, we came up with a newer version of the calculator. It has got its own security section. It's got the ability to figure out your fully burdened costs for your techs, and it can really help you maximize what you're getting out of managed service agreements. Join us, and we're also going to get you a copy of that calculator to use as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a killer takeaway. So expect emails from that and all these other good things. Guys, we're over time, but thank you so much. Carrie Hendricks again. Thank you, sir, from IT Cyber Solutions. And Mark from M3 Networks and also CyberCare Vision. And Tyler from TrustedSec. Thank you guys so much for taking the time and doing this. It's a really timely and important topic. You guys are such good resources. I really appreciate you coming on.
A pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
And thanks everybody in the audience. If you have any other questions, need any help, want to get in touch with these guys, all the information is going to be in the doc that we'll share. So thank you again. Keep an eye out for that. And we'll see you hopefully next Thursday and the Thursday after that. All right. Bye, guys. Thanks, everyone.